I never expected for something like this to happen at a customer's house. Part 2. I eventually woke up and found myself in the same exact spot I fell asleep in. For a solid minute, I had no idea where I was. I tried to remember what had happened. I soon remembered how I got there. I remembered everything. I felt exhausted, but I also felt a deep rage burning inside me. Rage at that man who shot me and locked me down here. I looked down at my right leg. I saw I still had the tranquilizer stuck in it. I pulled it out and started to try and stand up. It took a few tries before I finally successfully got to my feet. I ran up the stairs to test the door. I have no idea why I did it. I already knew that it was locked. I guess I just wanted to try and see to be completely certain. I know it was kind of dumb. When I turned the knob, it didn't move. Not even so much as a slight turn. It stayed exactly where it was. However, the moment I put my hand on the knob and tried to turn it, I heard the man's voice from the other side. He hadn't moved. In all that time while I was knocked out, he stayed put. He had shut the door and locked me in, but he hadn't moved. His voice boomed out from the other side in a hideous yell. He sounded angry. Aggressive. Like he was ready to kick down the door and beat me up in about 2 seconds. "Don't you dare try and get out of that basement, Elijah." I quickly ran back down the stairs and attempted to cool down after the sudden jolt of fear I had just felt in the past minute. How did he know my name? I tried to think of any way he could possibly have known it. I suddenly realized that he must have seen my name tag when I first walked into the house. But I didn't like the way he said it. It sounded so demanding and antagonistic. Like he was using my own name against me. I noticed that there were no footsteps upstairs, meaning the man was still standing directly on the other side. Waiting. I suddenly remembered the chained woman behind me. I couldn't believe that I'd forgotten her. I saw that she was relieved I was alive, but she was still scared about what would happen when the man came back down. I then realized something else that I'd forgotten. Idiot. I thought to myself. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and pressed the power button. It was dead. Great. Awesome. Just my luck. I put my phone back into my pocket and kicked the ground in anger. I turned back to the woman in the middle of the room. She was even more scared than before. She wasn't making any sound other than anxious breathing. Tears started to crawl down her cheeks. "Hey," I tried to calm her down while still remaining quiet so the man won't hear me. "It's okay. We will get out of here. There's 2 of us and only one of him." Most of this talk was for myself. I honestly had no idea if she would be alright. Especially considering her condition. She could have bled out at any moment, and I was fully expecting her to pass out from shock. Nonetheless, I still tried to console her and create a plan that would guarantee freedom for the both of us. Fortunately, I was still wearing my tool belt and had several other things in my pockets and on my vest. We could use one of my tools to get out. Unfortunately, I left my entire tool bag in the bathroom upstairs. That bag contained most of my large and dangerous tools, which I wasn't allowed to keep on my belt. The man upstairs could steal one of those tools and use it to trap and/or kill us. I tried not to spend too much time thinking about the latter. I got right to work on the former. I pulled off my tool belt and started looking through it for anything sharp that could free the woman from her shackles. Upon seeing it, I immediately grabbed my wrench. I ran over to the shackle attached to the woman's left ankle and tried to somehow bend or break the chain. After a few minutes of uselessly turning the wrench every which way, the chain had stayed perfectly intact. I hadn't accomplished anything. I threw the wrench aside with a clatter and went back to my belt to find something else. I saw my pipe cutters in one of my back belt pockets. I barely ever used them at a customer's house, so I sometimes forgot that I even had them with me, but I still couldn't believe that I hadn't thought about them sooner. I instantly took them and bolted back to the chain. I clamped the cutters around the chain, and they cut through it like scissors and paper. I did the same thing to the other 2 chains, and soon the woman was completely free. She tried to stand up, but her knees buckled and she fell back down into the dark pool of blood. She tried to stand back up a second time and she put her left hand down to push herself up, but she lost her balance and once more fell hard on her butt. She had been sitting down on that floor for God knows how long and her legs had lost most of their strength. But even if she did have strength in her legs, she had no right arm to keep herself balanced. She sat there in the puddle of her own bodily fluid and began to softly weep again. I realized that her stump arm and the several cuts around her body were slowly contributing to the puddle of blood, and it was only growing bigger with each passing second. I walked over to her and tried once again to console her. "Oh, come on. As you can probably tell, I didn't have much experience with this sort of thing, so I didn't know exactly how to make her feel better, especially given what she had been through. "I'll help you up, and we'll find our way out of here together. You're already out of your chains. We just have to get out of this basement and sneak out of the house without him catching us. All right?" The woman nodded. I wrapped her arm around my shoulder and slowly stood her up. I could feel her quivering in fear as she got to her feet and began to limp across the room with my assistance. When we reached the bottom of the stairs, I realized it wouldn't be much use to walk her up while supporting her like this. She could barely walk at all. I asked if she wanted to be carried up the stairs. She said no and told me that she wanted to do it herself. I then reminded her of when she fell before. That made her quickly agree. I gently picked her up and tried to get the least amount of blood on me as possible. I held her back in one arm and her legs in the other. I began my trek up the seemingly endless staircase. As we ascended, I remembered that the man was probably still standing right behind the door. I also reminded myself that the door was most likely still locked. I got to the top step and I noticed that I had to make a decision. While still holding the woman in my arms, I reached for the doorknob. I knew it was going to still be locked, but I wanted to see if the man would yell at me again if I tried to open it. To my surprise, I was able to turn the knob. Not only that, but I could turn it all the way. The door was no longer locked. I was very confused as to why the man had unlocked the door if he had yelled at me for trying to escape before. Maybe he wanted us to escape. Maybe this is all part of his twisted plan. But why? It doesn't make sense. I decided to leave these questions unanswered. They would only bring more fear than reassurance. I slowly pushed the door open, fully expecting to find the man staring back at me the moment I opened it. But there was no one. The man was gone. In fact, it was near pitch black throughout the whole house. I shouldn't have been so surprised considering the fact that I was unconscious for a while, but it just seemed strange. It was almost dusk when I first arrived at the house, but that could have been hours ago. Also, the man had turned off all the lights in the entire house to make it harder for us to find anything. I tried not to seem worried as I stepped fully onto the main floor and shut the basement door behind me. I set the woman back down onto her own feet while still keeping her arm wrapped around my shoulder to support her. I squinted my eyes and looked through the darkness as best as I could. I attempted to look around at the rooms next to me while also remembering which way I had come when I found the basement initially. I'm pretty sure I came from the left. Right? So that means I have to go to the right this time. No. I have to go to the left and retrace my steps. Wait. I have to go right to do that. Don't I? Did I even come from the right? Didn't I come from the left? I could have sworn that I came in from the right though. Oh no. I'm lost now. The longer I stood helplessly debating with myself, the darker the house became. I had little to no hope of finding a way out, but I had to make the best of it. I wrapped my right arm around the woman's back to guide her easier as we walked through the house. I took a deep breath and took my first step forward. I started towards the room to my left. I had to start to feel my way around the room every step of the way. It got darker. Much darker. I could barely see the woman standing directly next to me. The house had also gone deathly quiet once again. I could only hear the panicked breathing of me and the woman. At any moment, the man could jump out in front of us and kill us and we'd have no idea. I kept that in my mind, but I did my best to press on nonetheless. Suddenly, a loud crashing sound filled the room. It made both of us literally jump out of fear. It sounded like a lamp had fallen or a window broke. We both knew the man was probably doing this on purpose just to mess with us and make us scared, but that didn't make us feel any better. If anything, it scared us more because now we knew that whatever caused that sound was not an accident and it would most likely happen again. We kept stepping forward trying to ignore our internal fears that were steadily growing by the second. After a few more steps, I heard a slight crunch. It sounded like it came from the floor. The crunch was immediately followed by the sound of a soft whimper from the woman. She sounded pained and ready to cry. More so than normal. "What's wrong?" I whispered. When we spoke, our voices were never audible. Only the sounds of our soft whispers were heard and even those were extremely quiet. "Something's cutting my foot," she responded in a shaky tone. I didn't hesitate before I bent down and picked her back up again. If her foot was in pain, I didn't want her standing on it. It then occurred to me that the woman was not wearing anything on her feet. Her heels and toes were completely exposed. Once I had her safely in my arms, I used my shoes to feel around for anything on the floor. I felt small bits of something. They made a small clatter when I moved them around. I couldn't be sure, but I was almost positive that it was broken glass. I quickly kicked all the pieces to the side and out of our way. I then asked the woman if she wanted me to see if there was glass in her foot. She told me no because it didn't hurt that much now, but she asked me to carry her the rest of the way just in case. I agreed to comply and we pressed on. It took us at least 5 minutes to go through each room. I could no longer feel for the wall because I was holding the woman in my arms, so I had to baby step my way along. Nothing eventful happened for the next few rooms. There was some occasional banging or stomping, by that man no doubt, but we tried to pay them no mind as we continued. We eventually made it out of one room and turned a corner. I could see the front window. A street light was shining through it, glimmering hope throughout the entire room. The woman and I both exhaled ecstatically. We were almost out. I broke into a jog. I didn't care if I bumped into anything at this point. I could see the literal light at the end of the tunnel. We were so close. Then suddenly, a bang rang out and shook the entire house. It was like someone set off a cannon in a living room. I swear I almost went deaf from it. I nearly dropped the woman out of the immense shock. I managed to gather myself once more a few seconds later. Just when I was about to look for what could possibly have made that sound, a blinding white light got shined in my eyes. I let out a slight yell. It had scared me so much that I had to take a few steps back to catch my breath for a moment and compose myself. The woman also got very scared by this. It seemed like the source of the light was about a foot in front of me, but what was making it shine? I felt something abruptly hit my stomach, knocking most of the wind out of me. Without thinking, I dropped the woman onto the floor and clutched my belly tightly as I tried to gasp for air. The light disappeared and I was hit again. This time, the blow went right to my cheek. I fell to the floor in complete disorientation. I heard someone laughing at my pain. Even though I still couldn't see anything, I knew that it was the man. He was now attacking us. "I told you that you weren't allowed to come out of the basement, Elijah," the man yelled. His voice had lots of anger, but it also had a slightly underlying happy tone. I could hear him start to attack the woman because she began to scream and shout for him to get off. I heard grunting and struggling from both of them, followed by various slaps and smacks. I was still on my side, wheezing and writhing, but I could hear every awful thing happening to the woman. I started to get up to fight the man when suddenly I heard the struggle stop. I felt something hard press against my forehead. "If you move one more inch," the man threatened, "you'll get a nice bullet in your brain. And this one won't be a tranquilizer like before." I didn't move. I didn't dare. I heard no movement for almost an entire minute. He eventually took the gun away from my forehead. I couldn't see what happened next, but I can assume. There were a few more seconds of silence before another thunderous bang caused my eardrums to nearly burst for a second time. For a moment, I thought I was dead. I thought I would drift off then and there and that would be it, but it didn't happen. I didn't get shot. Then, what happened? I realized that I had made a frightened gasp when the gun went off, but I didn't hear the woman make any sound at all. It was almost like she knew it would happen, or something had prevented her from making any sound. Something had silenced her. Something. Like a bullet. Oh God. I felt around for the woman even though I knew there was no hope left. I touched something that I could only assume was her hand. I picked it up and I could sense the life draining from it. I began to cry. I had failed her. The man just laughed at her pain. My sadness quickly changed to anger. I clenched both of my fists and was ready to swing. The man knew I was about to strike because he raised the gun back up and pointed it at my face again. He attempted to threaten me again, but I didn't listen. My mind was already dead set on my goal. Without having any sort of visual, I swung my right fist through the darkness. I hit the man square in the side of the head. The gun went off again, but I was hardly dazed by the bang this time, even though it was right next to my ear. I swung my left fist and hit the man again. He fell onto the floor beside the woman. I could tell he was struggling to comprehend what just happened. Without another thought, I got up and ran over to the front window. I slid it open and leapt out onto the front lawn. Never before had I been so grateful to feel the wind and air on my face, but I couldn't stop now. I saw my plumbing truck still parked in the driveway. That fool didn't think to dismantle my truck? Ha! I ran over to it without looking back. I frantically felt around for the keys in my pocket. I found them and pulled them out just as I reached the truck. I unlocked the door and climbed in. I turned the key and started to look round for somewhere to escape. I put the car in reverse, but before I backed up, I decided to finally look back at the house. That was a mistake. The light of the moon shone directly onto the house's front window. I saw the man standing in it with a chilling childish grin. In one hand he was holding a long metal saw. It was my saw. The one I had left in my toolbox in the bathroom. He has stole it just like I thought he would. In the other hand he held the poor woman's fresh corpse. I could see in his eyes that he had every intention of using them together. In an instant, my plan of escape changed. I switched the car from reverse to drive. I leaned back and floored it. The truck went off the driveway and onto the lawn as it rapidly approached the front window. When the man realized what I was doing, his grin turned into a fearful stare. He jumped out of the way, and a second later, my truck crashed into the front window at full speed. Pieces of glass and brick flew everywhere. All the airbags went off, and I was forcefully jerked back into my seat. After a moment, all was still once more. I awkwardly climbed out of the car and made my way through the rubble. Surprisingly, I was not terribly injured. My neck and back hurt, but that was pretty much it. As I shut the door, I saw two bodies laying on top of each other in the middle of the rubble. The slide about 2 feet from the corpses. I knew, at last, the man was dead. I walked out of the giant hole in the front of the house and was greeted by several worried people who had heard the crash in the night. I told them to call the police. One of them offered for me to come into their house while we waited for the authorities to come. I agreed. Once inside, I asked if I could use his bathroom. I needed to change my outfit. I'd been wearing the same thing for too long. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I looked like hell. Which was kind of fitting because I was just there. I looked at my shirt and then at my pants. They were muddy and torn in several places. There were several blood stains in the center of my shirt. I examined the shirt close. It looked like it was missing something. It had to be. I thought for a second on what could possibly be gone. I froze once I saw it. My name tag wasn't there. I thought for a second that I had dropped it somewhere in the house, but then I remembered that I had taken it off in the truck before I first entered the man's house. If I had taken it off, I thought to myself, then how did that man know my name? He said it twice. How could he possibly know? The only way he could know is if he knew who I was before he called for me to come to his house. He knew who I was. He specifically asked for me when he called for a plumber. He wanted me at that house. He wanted me to go into that basement and get trapped. But why me? Well, the man is dead now, so I guess that question will never be answered.